Hello and welcome to this special bulletin on the top international stories making waves around the globe. Thank you for joining me, Ayushman Singh Jamwal. Our top focus is on the big political development emerging from the United States. United States President Joe Biden has said that he plans to run for re-election in 2024. Biden has said he intends to be the Democratic candidate in 2024. Both Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris have said they will be contesting together. Top White House advisors are set to make a final decision on launching Biden's re-election campaign. This has silenced Biden's critics and the Democratic camp. And most importantly, all of Biden's critics in that Democratic camp have now reassessed the fact that he is the best man for the job. And also, this has ended the debate when it comes to Biden's health and his ability to hold office. But so far, there has been no challenger from within the Democratic camp. So Joe Biden taking that stand that he will contest the 2024 presidential elections in the United States. Now let's get you the voices from both sides of the aisle. I'm joined by Calvin Duck as well as Puneet Ahluwalia joining us on the broadcast. Thank you both of you for joining us on CNN News 18. Calvin, I'll come to you first. What's going for Joe Biden when it comes to the 2024 presidential elections? Is it a certain legislative agenda? Is it a policy agenda? Or is it the waning influence of Trumpism in elections across the United States?
Well, I think if you look at everything except President Biden's age, which he'll be 82 in November of 2024, you have a president that has made a lot of progress towards his campaign promises, withdrew from Afghanistan, helped bring back the U.S. economy from a global pandemic, appointed the first African-American woman justice on the Supreme Court. If he was not going to be 82, we wouldn't even have a question. We wouldn't even be asking if he's going to run for a re-election. So I think that what Biden has been able to do merits re-election. However, the biggest concern that Republicans, Democrats, and independents have is his age.
Right. And do you think that that could open a space for another Democrat to jump into the race? Or is he riding a wave that no Democratic candidate would put in his money to take on Joe Biden?
No, and it's not because there isn't a Democrat that could possibly do as good or better. Mm-hmm. What's happening now is for President Biden, it doesn't help him to get in any earlier. You know, he's the president, he has the exposure. It's not as if he needs to make an official announcement to make the news cycles. However, for the Democratic Party and other potential Democratic candidates, it leaves them in limbo. What that means is that other potential Democratic candidates can't prepare as they would, say, if there was a primary competing against each other, and they can't really plan a plan B. Mm-hmm. And so that's why this works for Biden's timing, but it puts the Democratic Party and other potential Democratic candidates in a very tough position of limbo.
Right. Puneet, I want to come to you on the Republican side of this entire discussion. First, I want to figure out what camp do you belong to when it comes to the Republican Party? Are you someone who believes that the previous election was rigged?
Well, I believe in the camp of conservative Republican and a proud American, mm-hmm. and always about a country united and a beacon of hope for folks around the world, mm-hmm. not only within the United States. So that's the camp I belong to, and America first too. So to answer the question of our fellow friend there, I think Biden had a very successful midterm election, mm-hmm. and that's the reason there is no one to challenge his success. And this is since JFK, he's done extremely well. Regarding his success aspect, I think the bungling of exit out of Afghanistan was a complete disaster. I think he has got serious challenges on hand with the inflation, along with the economy, and of course the war in Europe, I would say Ukraine. And then again, all the other countries coalescing together, which is China and Russia, along with Iran playing a role. And that means he's perceived as a weak leader around the world. Mm-hmm. And I think age is no matter. I think it all depends from now till the election time, which is going to start heating up in 2024 early on. And we may see something happens. But the other problem the Democrats have is that Kamala Harris has not stepped up to the plate. And even the vice president role is very insignificant, but it's important, and that's the reason why President Biden doesn't feel confident in Vice President Harris. I think a lot of people who are running his administration feel he's good, and that's the reason why the Democratic Party giving him a pass. So I think it'll be very interesting, and we will see more candidates come out from the Republican side. We have a great slate of Republican leaders ready to run, and it'll be an interesting 2024.
Right, but Puneet, that interesting point that you're saying that more candidates from the Republican side could come up. So you're telling me that Donald Trump is not a lock-in for the Republican ticket?
Well, the Democrats would want him to be the lock-in because, as we know, that the journal he may win the primary nomination or may perceived at this point because his ratings are very high on how the judiciary has been weaponized by the Democratic Party. But I think we have a lot of one too many slips between a cup and a lips. We have a long way to go. And I feel there are other candidates who are quite capable, who've done very well. Ron DeSantis is one of them, who's had great governance. And look at the people flocking away out of California into Florida, the success in Florida they had, and the good he did during the hurricane. So, he's got a track record. And I think at some point, the entire Republican Party will start rallying around DeSantis, or if not, somebody else. But at this point, it seems he's the most capable, the most, I would say, the best one who can really win the election in 2024.
Right.
From my perspective.
Right. Calvin, how do you see that pitch coming in from Puneet? He is saying that the Republican ticket is also an open field, that Donald Trump is not a lock-in. Do you see the Republican camp the same way?
That's wishful thinking. And I think that line of thought, if the Republican leadership had that line of thought, they would have a better chance in 2024. Because let's just think about it. Even after the legal issues with Donald Trump, I believe one of the polls I saw this weekend is that he's 20 points ahead of DeSantis, if DeSantis, was officially a candidate. And if we look at people who, like, objectively, Nikki Haley, Mike Pence, for example, Republicans who I don't agree with, but who definitely don't have the baggage that Donald Trump has, they're fighting for 1, 2, 3, 5%. And so I think that for Biden, if Trump is the nominee, Biden has the best chance of beating him again. Okay. Mm-hmm. Now, the dilemma that Democrats may find themselves in is if Biden does officially run, as he's indicated today that he would, and the Republicans miraculously change course and nominate someone other than Trump, then that introduces another dynamic that might give the Republicans an advantage. But I don't see anytime soon the Republican Party being able to quit Donald Trump.
Right, Puneet, so that pitch coming in from the Democratic side that they don't see the Republican Party quitting Donald Trump anytime soon, and it's all a game of numbers. Also, I want to ask you, these people who surround Donald Trump, the pro-Trump Republicans, the Matt Gaetz, the Lauren Bobers, the Marjorie Taylor Greens, who get all that coverage in the United States when it comes to pitching Trump as the candidate against Biden in 2024. Do you think Trump is still a force to be reckoned with when it just comes purely to the numbers, when it comes to winning those primaries ahead of picking who will be the Republican candidate to face off against Biden?
Well, Trump is definitely a force to reckon with. Please don't discount him. He's one of the folks who really knows how to take any adversity or disadvantage and turn it to his advantage. I think he knows how to use the media. He's a great showman. I wouldn't discount him, but I look at, again, there are one too many issues that are going on within his own legal issues. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I also recognize that a large part of the American Republican leadership and most of the American public wants to move away and wants to find a way to work together. And that was a message that the Republican leadership also got during this midterm election, that the United States, the citizens of the United States, are looking for ways for people, especially both parties, to work together. And there are real challenges. There are kitchen table issues which Americans are facing every day. And that's the reason why the message, I think, will register. And I think most people want to move away from populism. They want to move for somebody who can really get things done. And I would say the policies of Donald Trump were very successful. In fact, Biden has bungled up the entire economy and everything. He got everything on an
Right.
autopilot. We had the pandemic in control. The other countries were in check. But I think his perception as a weak leader, and which he is, and also the agenda, the social woke agenda, has become the priority of this leftist Democratic Party. I wish the party really comes back to good governance and work together with Kevin McCarthy and the Republican leadership. I think there's a
Right.
lot more to be done because we are facing a serious threat both in Europe and in other parts of the world. So it's important that we do more, and most importantly, do first for the American people.
Calvin, do you agree with this optimism coming from you, Puneet? Because he seems to be saying that that the American public can differentiate between the policy and the rhetoric. Like the policy is here, and the rhetoric about, the elections being rigged, defund the FBI, the nicknames he makes for all his competitors. These are all on one side. That is just political showboating. The policies are something that will propel Donald Trump and any other Republican forward. Even Ron DeSantis, the main kind of narrative of his in the American airwaves is the fact that he's waging that war against Disney. He's waging a war against wokeism. But as Puneet says, that's on one side. His policies are what are winning over the public and the Republican voters. Do you see it the same way?
Absolutely not. It might be optimistic. It's just not realistic. When it comes to Biden's perception abroad, let's ask Ukraine's president if he thinks that Biden is weak. I think, too, when we talk about what Republicans are standing for, wokeism, is just racism cloaked in a term that Ron DeSantis and others can't really define, but it's anything that deals with diversity, promoting equality in our society. And guess what? No matter what you think about wokeism or whatever it is, that doesn't address people's economic concerns. It doesn't address crime, for example. It doesn't address our foreign policy. And I think that Americans from all parties and those unaffiliated with a party, they hear the rhetoric and they realize that that's the priority of the Republican Party, that even if they agreed with those right-wing, often racist policies, they don't really address the problems that Americans are seeing. And also one other thing, I will say that some of the policies of Trump are very popular among a very small group of people, namely those with a lot of money, corporations. They did well under Trump because that's Trump's constituency, and I can totally understand how they want to have him back in office. But for average Americans or Americans who are struggling, they need policies that are more aligned with the Democratic Party, and we're seeing that. We're seeing things like the infrastructure bill and other programs that Biden has championed. Those are helping regular Americans, and I think that's what America wants and needs.
Right. Puneet, I see you shaking your head as well. And the pitch that Calvin is making over here is that, like, regardless of the policies, the narrative set out by, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert, Matt Gaetz, these are the things that kind of hide the policy achievements of Donald Trump, if you agree that there have been policy achievements. And that point coming in from Calvin is that the rhetoric is the biggest undoing of the Republican Party, because that shows the American people that this is their top priority, fighting, doing the shadow boxing with wokeism across America. Your response to that?
There's no shadow boxing. It's all out in the open. Look at the parents crying out for a role they want to play in their kids' education. Let's look at the families who have been impacted by the crime spree. When we talk about defunding the police, that's what is happening. The most vulnerable are the ones who are being penalized by defunding the police, which is the rhetoric of the Democratic Party. Look at the taxes going up. And if President Biden wants to keep giving money away to other countries, the problem we have is, what about the future of our kids? And that's where the other problem is Biden's going to have, is that he will lose the youth vote, which is very important, and which he got earlier. And your own CNN polls showed that he's not going to be successful in getting the young voter. And I talk about internationally. I think, again, I am not looking to Boberts and Marjorie Taylor, but most common sense people in the Republican Party who are in part of the leadership, who really want to see the Republican Party move towards good governance. But look at the Abraham Accord. It's fantastic. He brought manufacturing back. He took on China. He did so many positive things, and that's what we should talk about and build upon. And if you see wokeism, it is a serious problem we have right now. As I stated before, being in education, being in defunding the police, being in the crime, the list goes on, and it's important to to get our priorities right, and that's what the American people are looking for.
Right. And do you think, Calvin, that the Democrats are on the right side of this culture war that is being waged by the Republicans? Do you think that this will be a guiding narrative? Because there have been a lot of criticism against the Democratic Party, against AOC, against other Democratic leaders, that they have gone so far left that wokeism has gone out of control when it comes to, talking about sexuality, talking about education. Critical race theory has become such a hot topic. And this is also getting a lot of pushback against Democrats from the African American community, a community that has been kind of a lock-in for the Democrats for so many years. Many of them seem to be drifting towards the Republicans as well.
Well, I think just one thing to keep in mind, particularly when it comes to defunding the police, not only is that not Biden's policy, he actually has been very much against it and caught flack from those in the Democratic Party who had suggested it. The only party that's actively now calling for defunding the police is the Republicans, defunding the FBI.
Utter nonsense. That is utter nonsense.
Right. Puneet, let Calvin finish, then you can continue.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Some of the things you mentioned, cultural issues, wokeism, whatever you want to call it, that's racism, and it's denying equality and equal protection to the LGBT community. And you know what? That's what's going to hurt the Republican Party with young people, because one thing that young people understand, from Republicans, young people to Democratic young people to independents, is they understand that we live in 2023 and there should be equality and protections for the LGBT community. They understand that just because you are opening up our education system to make sure that all perspectives are taught and viewed, that we're not sexualizing children. Young people know that, and especially if we're again on the issue of abortion, they believe in women's reproductive rights. All of these things Republicans are fighting against, and I don't see how they think they're going to win over the youth with policies like this that even young Republicans don't agree with. So one other thing I just want to point out, when you mentioned with African Americans, there are things that African Americans as a community don't necessarily agree with when it comes to President Biden. But you know what? They know far and beyond that those policies are closer to what they want than the Republican policies that are from the 1950s, not from 2023.
Right. But do you also feel that this democratic agenda that you're talking about, that will secure the youth vote for you, the greatest success of the democratic agenda would be to cross over into the Republican heartlands with that same agenda, to get the Republicans on your side, to get the Republican voters, on your side, especially because I feel there's a generation gap when it comes to the voting, when it comes to these issues. You're saying the youth are lockstep with the Democratic Party on this agenda, but you need to get the elder voters also on your side, because let's face it, when it comes to voting patterns, the youth vote much less than the older generations when it comes to casting their ballot. How do you feel that the Democrats will bridge that gap?
Well, I think that they understand that while there are things that may appeal to young people that are different to older voters, they have to stand for their values. And one of the values of the Democratic Party is embracing the diversity that we have in all of our ways in the United States. And the Democrats understand for the long term, that's the winning strategy, because that reflects principles for the years to come, not just for the next election. And I think that one of the things we're going to see is that, you talked about bringing Republicans in. I think that a lot of these so-called culture, social issues that Republicans are focusing on, rather than issues like the economy that folks want to talk about, a lot of Republicans realize that they're not in that camp with those who want to persecute trans youth, for example, or want to roll back LGBT rights. And I think that they are considering the Democratic Party, considering moderate Democrats in local elections, because the Republican Party principles are out of step with people in this year, in this decade.
And Puneet, you have a completely different view, don't you? You feel that the Democratic voters are the ones who are drifting towards the Republicans because, as you say, the Republicans are pushing a common sense agenda when it comes to empowering America.
And that's exactly when he said, "Oh, it's President Biden who wants to take on the defund the police folks." No, he's the leader. He is the leader of the Democratic Party, and he's the president also. So and he's going to run again. Look at the crisis the country is facing. We have a fentanyl crisis. We have a huge drug issue which is coming in, and it's the defunding police, which is basically having our helpless kids at the same time families who are unable to do anything about it. Nowadays, the crime spree is so serious that police doesn't have, they're understaffed, they don't have the resources, and at the same time, if there are some serious crimes that happen, the officers have barely slept for a few hours, and then they're coming in to work because people are leaving the police force and going to states like Florida and other states where the police are appreciated and the first responders are appreciated and they're paid very well. So that whole defunding the police is another issue. That is going to impact the Democratic Party because the Republicans or the Americans in large see that these policies are hurtful to communities. And the other crisis we have, immigration crisis. It's serious. We have huge slew of people coming in, and the things which should be available, or the facilities or the resources that should be available to citizens, are now going to folks who have coming in and breaking the rule of law in our country. And then I'll go into the other aspect is I am a proud Indian American. I love my heritage. I'm proud American. But the fact of the matter is that the Indian or the Asian American community has been targeted by the Democratic school board, which wants to really penalize education not based on merit. It's being penalized because they want to push in kids and lower the grades. It's not anymore based on merit. It's just based on
so you're saying there is
there is
affirmative
the country.
Yeah, so you're saying there is active affirmative action when it comes to education as well, and it's going down into the primary levels as well?
Oh, it's going down. And by the way, if parents do stand up, they're called the terrorists. They're called they're being hounded. Their names are being taken, and when there are rapes happening or things happening to kids in schools by transgender or by a person, again, we are a very giving country. All kids are unique and the gift of God's, and everybody's unique in the eyes of God, and I support that aspect. But at the same time, let's keep that divide. Let's have a priority. Let's not divide our kids, because it's so important. And that idea of individual liberty, which we conservatives or we Republicans believe in, is now being basically put into a box, which means the box is that everybody is you are in LGBTQ box, you're in this box, you're in race box, you're an Asian, or you're privileged. This is not what America is about. That's not the country I immigrated to 33 years ago. This is a very different nation.
Calvin,
so that whole rhetoric and dividing and keep talking about that social issue, which people don't care about. They want to make sure that they have a roof on their head and the food on the table. And this is a great place to raise a family.
Right. Calvin, I want to get your perspective on that. Puneet raised that point that he feels that the one thing that is a kind of a chink in the Democratic armor when it comes to fighting American politics is the fact that there is an intolerance, and I'll use the word intolerance, towards conservative values, conservative ideals, which is why, as per what Puneet is saying, even among the immigrant communities, the Latin American communities, the Indian American communities, even the African American communities, there is a drift away from the Democrats towards the Republicans for basic brick and mortar solutions to their everyday issues. Would you agree with that, as what Puneet is saying?
Absolutely not, because you mentioned intolerance to conservative values. If conservative values are stopping kids from learning about African American history, then yeah, we should be intolerant to that. If conservative values are about getting rid of diversity, equity, inclusion programs from public universities and from our government, then yes, we should be intolerant to those kind of conservative values. If we start banning books because parents, many of whom haven't read them, but have heard that they have things that might divide our kids, then yes, we should be intolerant to that. I think that one of the things that Republicans have done is they have focused in on these social issues, hoping to distract from the fact that they don't have a plan for the economy. They have a lot of critiques of what Biden is doing, but they don't have a solution to focus on. So let's focus on banning books. You know, we talk about the crisis at the border. We talk about our immigration challenges, which there are many, but instead of actually proposing solutions, they criticize Biden. They talk about fentanyl and our fentanyl crisis, yet they don't talk about the fact that Biden has seized more fentanyl at the border than they did in the Trump years. Once again, if you don't have real solutions to real problems, it's easy to go to these culture wars because those are wars that are never really won, but they can be argued ad nauseum. That is what we're seeing today.
Right. Thank you, Calvin Duck and Puneet Ahluwalia, for having this fascinating discussion on the state of American politics as Joe Biden pitches his name for the 2024 presidential elections. What are the rumblings in the Republican camp? Will Trump secure that nomination to face off against Biden again, or will Ron DeSantis emerge as a dark horse and take on Joe Biden in 2024? We'll have to wait and watch.